Iti Maha Mahotsava ki, Shri Radha Thakurani ki. I wanted today explore Radharani's position in our tradition. And you guys gotta pay attention and bear with me. We did the program early today, which cuts our numbers down because I don't know what the deal is, but somehow or other our devotees like night programs. And so a daytime program, our numbers are small. But I was a little shy about speaking what I'm going to speak today, so I'm going to take that as a good thing. Our numbers are small, and so we can discuss things in a more detailed way than we normally would. But if you could all kindly pay close attention, we're going to cover quite a bit of ground. I guess the first thing I wanted to touch on, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and by extension his followers, introduced some novel ideas into the practice of bhakti that existed throughout India 500 years ago. Now, like all good Hindus, we don't invent a new religion. Rather, we find novel elements that we're highlighting in the pre-existing tradition, and they just haven't gotten the attention they deserve previously. For instance, in the Gita, Krishna highlights bhakti very strongly, contrasting it to the ritual culture, Soma yagnas, and yagna in general. And he explains how he is aham hi savya yagyanam bhokta cha prabhu eva cha. He is the enjoyer of all sacrifice. And that all sacrifice is ultimately to please him. And that yagyai japa yagyosmi, that of all yagnas I'm japa. And so Krishna quotes verses from the Upanishads, critiques other sections of the Vedas, tells you in essence not to follow the Vedas, disparagingly comparing them to a well when you're in front of an ocean. What's the value of a well when you're in front of an ocean? That happens early on in the Gita. But then eventually says, Vedes chasavera hameva vedya, by all the Vedas I am to be known. And there's kind of a Vedes chasavai, by all the Vedas. Ahameva vedya, I am to be known. But the word Vedya, to be known, is the same root vid as the word Veda. And so he's really saying the Vedas, which are books of knowledge, are ultimately teaching only me. You follow? Just like if you were to say, by all knowledge, I am to be known. You're using this word know, it's in the word knowledge, as well as is in the word know, known. Does that make sense? So, when we flesh out or explore or Naika, what are you doing? You're either in or out. What are you going to do? You sit with Malini? Okay, sit with Malini and you're with her. So when I say some novel ideas were introduced, I don't literally mean things were invented out of nowhere. I mean things were pulled from secret compartments where they were locked away in the Vedas. And somebody who had the key was able to unlock and spot these things and flesh them out. But there were some new ideas that came from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One of them, and there's a commentator named Bojadev, he spoke about it some centuries prior, and it's not completely new, and it's actually there in the Bhagavatam itself, which we have a goal of selling 100 sets of Bhagavatams in the next 10 days. We've sold about 30 of them, so you should all buy a set of books. We actually don't make any money on them. We sell them for exactly what we pay for them wholesale. That's how important this is for us. And if you already have a set of Bhagavatams, you should buy a set from us and give them to a friend. Because we got to get these numbers up. We want to get these books out. And not just these books, but the whole set we want to get out. And if you buy them in the next 10 days, we'll come to your home and install them and do arti to them. It'll be a really auspicious ceremony. This is our goal. So the Bhagavatam is really unique amongst Vedic texts, in that normally in an Upanishad or in a Purana, you'll have a fairly limited number of verse styles which will be adopted. Obviously, there's things like Anustup and Tristup. There's a few, 11-syllable, 13-syllable verses. But the Bhagavatam makes use of no less than 20 verse styles. And you only find that number of verse styles in poetry. You have to go to poetic works, champus, and really complicated poetic works to find this many verse styles. And in fact, there's no other Purana which makes use of so many poetic devices as the Bhagavatam. And this whole poetry thing in Sanskrit it's a really important development that came, anyway, Sanskrit's a very formal language. Actually, Sanskrit means formal versus Prakrit, which was more spoken, which means natural. And so it's a very formally constructed language which lends itself incredibly well to poetry. And then poetry is part of and almost synonymous with dramaturgy in ancient Sanskrit. And there was an author named Bharat Muni who wrote some texts, the Nanta Shastras, and these texts explain how to write a drama, how to put on a performance. And the idea behind a performance is when you do a performance on a stage, the audience that is sahridoy, that is favorably disposed, they vicariously experience, as the actors are acting out the drama, they vicariously experience what the actors are experiencing, or rather I should say, what they are performing on stage. If you look at Western drama, it is plot-driven, and there's always some kind of problem that occurs. Even if you look at a Disney movie, bizarrely, the characters in a Disney movie for 3-year-olds will come very close to death at some point in the story. It doesn't make any sense. We insulate our children from, my children don't even know what like meat eating is until they're about 8. And it's they've universally gone through like weeks and months of depression when they realize the caliber of people that populate the world. But we generally insulate our children. But if you look at even the simplest of plot-driven dramas, that you would take your kids to go see, like a G-rated Disney movie, the characters will come incredibly close to death, and then they get saved. And there's a reason for this. There's the introduction of the characters, then they undergo some tribulation, and then they overcome that tribulation. As a result of overcoming the adversity, you then undergo a cathartic experience alongside the actors, and you feel like you've grown. Even though you haven't. You've sat on your couch getting fat, eating potato chips. But you feel that you've soared and climbed mountains and done amazing stuff vicariously. Same thing happens in sports. That's why people get all wrapped up in their favorite sport team. So, this was not lost on the Indian dramaturgists, and they wrote elaborate rules for how to write a drama. And the core of their drama was not a plot-driven drama, although there were plot elements. It was rather a rus-driven approach. Rus is this feeling in your heart that you have. And they dedicated their dramas to evoking those feelings. And if you look at Indian dance, for instance, it's generally really poor in terms of gymnastic ability compared to, let's say, ballet. And if you study Bharatanatyam, Bharatanatyam was invented in the 1920s. Just say that again. Bharatanatyam was invented in the 1920s by an Indian dance teacher who came to the U.S. and borrowed elements of tap and jazz and ballet, then took them back to India and made up a style called Bharatanatyam that did not exist previously. And then everybody has a short memory, and so people start to think it's really old. There are older forms of Indian dance, Odissi and Kathak. And there was the whole Devadasis and the Nacha, but these were ladies of the night, for lack of a better term, if you look at their lifestyles and the biographies that have been written about them for centuries. And it was not done by the higher castes, but Bharatanatyam then reinvented it, reinvigorated it, and then all of a sudden Brahmanas were doing dance, doing Bharatanatyam, worshiping goddess Saraswati. But prior to the 1920s, that was never done. It's historically recent, post-World War I, to place it contextually. If you look at Indian dance, it's generally fairly simplistic compared to Western dance. And when it's not, they usually borrowed stuff from Western dance and brought it back to India. That was the point I was making. But where they excel, it's difficult as a man to watch Indian dance, because what you're really supposed to do when you watch the Indian dance performance is, more than anything else, you're supposed to look at the gesticulations, the hand movements, and the mudras. But even more than that, you're supposed to look at the woman's face. Specifically, you're supposed to look at the woman's eyes. You're supposed to deeply look in the woman's eyes while she's dancing, which is just, it's like slightly uncomfortable to deeply gaze into the performer's eyes and be transfixed on their eyes for the whole performance. But that's where all the magic happens. And when you look at Indian dance, where it's just like nothing else in the world. It's these really complicated hand movements that really tell a story, combined with this world of information you get from the eyes. And you could make a scene in an Indian drama where it was just a mother looking at her child. And you're just watching the mother look at her child. And by the end of the scene, you're crying because she evokes so much love in her eyes, because that's where they train. They train in their gaze and their eye movements and what that story they're telling with their eyes. So Indian drama was rus-driven. It was a rasa theory, that the purpose of the entire performance was to make you feel something. And the catharsis was in evoking that feeling. And the plot elements were secondary. And the core of the story was just in getting you to a place of feeling, so much so that an entire scene could be a mother looking at her child. The mother on the stage is crying. She might not even have a child. It might be a prop. But she's crying. You're crying. And you feel this incredible, evoking of parental love that's just overwhelming to you. The Bhagavatam adopts that model. And the purpose of the Bhagavatam is to evoke intense feeling for Krishna. Many of the chapters, especially in the 10th canto, finish Govinda Labate Ratim. And by this you achieve devotion, attachment. Rati is a term usually used to refer to like the type of attachment that forms in a conjugal, sexual, romantic relationship. But we actually use that terminology also for your relationship with God. Govinda labate ratim. And by this you achieve this intense love for Govinda. That's the purpose of the Bhagavatam, along with all of its poetic devices, along with all of its various types of verses. Manda Kranta, Shardula Vikridita, and all these complicated, really complicated mantras, verse styles with 19 and 20 syllables to a verse that you only find in the Bhagavatam amongst all the Puranas. Because these verses, in a formal language, they enable you to really do something magical with poetry, to where the person who reads the poetry just gets stunned. Another example of rasa, just like Pavan. Actually, I thought his name was Pavan, but apparently his name is Pavamana. And so his nickname is Pavan. But I always thought it was Pavan because that would be a more natural name for someone. But his proper name is Pavamana, which of course then becomes Pavan. Anyway, Pavan was singing. I came in the temple. The deities looked absolutely just like breathtakingly beautiful. And he was singing, and somehow he doubled it. I had to go and tell him, go back to the single time. So he was singing, Hare Krishna. What was it? What was the tune? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. But then he started, Hare Krishna, whatever it was, the double time version of that. And I had to say, stop. You're like, you just totally ruined the kirtan. I don't know if you guys felt it. But then he went back, and just my heart soared. The deities were there, and they were wearing their flower outfit. And I sat in front of Radha Krishna, and all the pujaris stopped pulling away the deities' plates because they didn't want to interrupt my darshan. And I had like a magic moment in time, stopped, and I felt so close to Radha and Krishna, and the kirtan was just perfect. Then Mahabala, he just started banging on the jumpa like crazily, and that disturbed me also, and I had to like tell him, please stop. You're also ruining it. And you had to just get it just right. And if you got it just right, everything was just perfect. The flower outfit, Radharani holding the Tulsi Manjari, and Krishna, and the deities, and the dress, and the offerings, and the time of day, and it was just all perfect. And sometimes these arrangements of verses and songs and instruments and the outfit and the setting, they all come together perfectly. And there's this je ne sais quoi. It's a certain something you can't say, but you can say it. That's what Indian drama was dedicated to figuring out. What is the formula for creating that experience in the heart of the audience? And so the Bhagavatam actually does that. And Bharat Muni did it. He said there's 7 primary sentiments. There's laughter, hasa, and there's being stunned and wonderstruck, vishmaya, and there's enthusiasm and sort of chivalry, utsaha. And then there's lamentation, shoka, and there's fear, bhaya, and there's disgust, jugupshu, and then there's shanta, peace, and there's shringar, romantic love. And I'm missing one. That was 8 of 9. What's 9? Anyway, my memory fails me. But he came up with these 9 elements that you're trying to... You looking up for me, Rupanugaji? Thank you. Right, Navarasa. It'll come up real easily. He came up with this thousands of years ago. And all Indian drama was dedicated to evoking these individual sentiments through the performance. And music and poetry and dance all came together on the stage, and the audience felt this. Prabhupada participated in a dance when he was a child. He was Advaita Acharya. And he says at the end of the performance, he was crying and the audience was crying. That's rasa. And that was just, that was, whatever that was, 80 years ago, or what, I guess it was 100 years at this point. But that was as a young man. He did this, and it was still alive. So we're talking thousands of years of a continued history where this was being done. What'd you guys find? Karuna. Mercy. Yeah. Compassion. Is that it?
Love, joy, wonder, courage, peace, sadness, anger.
Anger. Krodha. Krodha. It was anger. Shoka, Krodha. Yeah. Shoka, Krodha, Bhaya, Jugupsu. That was it. Those are the last four. Yeah. There are also different theorists, but the Navarasa of Bharat is these seven. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came along with his followers, they took these 9 and they broke them into 2 groups. Gauna Rati and Mukhya Rati, primary and secondary. Secondary are laughter, wonderment, courage, lamentation, anger, fear, and disgust. And primary are Shanta, peace, equanimity, and Shringar, romance. They gave Shringar a new name, Priyata or Madhura, sweet love, dear love. And then they filled in the blanks with 3 more. And what were the other 3? Servitude, friendship, and parental. So you can love Krishna in a neutral way. That was the highest sentiment for Bharat. That was the lowest sentiment for our acharyas. Then you can love Krishna up, that's a servant. Then you can love him equal, that's a friend. Then you can love him down, that's parental love. And then you can love him equal again, but with romance attached. And that's Shringarati. So they took the 9, they broke them into 2 groups, 7 of one, 5 of the other, and the 5 became Mukhya Rati, your primary Rati, your Sthayi Bhav, your permanent feeling towards Krishna. And they attempted to think about carefully the nature of the love described in the Bhagavatam towards Krishna. And they codified it. Then they used all the same principles. They had Vibhav and Anubhav and Sattvik Bhav and Sanchari Bhav and Sthayi Bhav. It's Radhakrishna Prabhu, you looking at your phone is somehow disturbing my mind. Forgive me. Please forgive me. I keep trying to not think of it, but my mind keeps going back there. What's he looking at? What's going on? My mind is not so powerful. And so they took the 9 rasas of Bharat, broke them into 2 groups, added 3 to the 1. That became Mukhya Rati, your primary feeling, your Sthayi Bhav for Krishna, and the other one was Gauna Rati, your secondary feeling for Krishna. So Mother Yashoda may look in Krishna's mouth and become bewildered. That's Vishmaya. That's a Sanchari Bhav. It's an accessory. Sanchari means accessory. It's an accessory sentiment, but her parental feeling towards Krishna never goes away. Did you follow this? And then you have like Kevala and Sankula. You have mixed sentiments and pure sentiments. Mother Yashoda has a primary sentiment, a pure sentiment. She just has parental love for Krishna. Balaram actually has friendship for Krishna and parental love mixed together. So some great personalities have a mixture of loves for Krishna, and then some have a pure sentiment for Krishna. And they looked at the Bhagavatam and they said, these are the types of devotion. If you think about it, it's very systematic. You can love Krishna up, equal, down, or equal, but with romance attached. And that's the primary rasas. And Bharat Muni's highest rasa, which was Shanta, peace, became the lowest one because it had the least amount of intense feeling for Krishna. And there's only one place where these 5 sentiments find their full expression, and that place is not Vaikuntha, it's Vrindavan. And therefore Vrindavan is where we want to go, because we want to explore these sentiments, specifically our own sentiment towards Krishna. And we model our love after following in the footsteps of the love of these great devotees and these ragatmakas, whose very existence is made of rag, of attachment to Krishna. We then follow in the wake of that, and we are rag anugas. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's gift to the world. Now, Vallabhacharya and others, Hithari Vangsh and others, they also had this rag feeling, this intense attachment, this Vrindavan thing. So we're really not unique in that regard. In fact, we're kind of second, because Rupa Goswami, when he's teaching Rag Anuga Bhakti, he says this is also called Pushti Marg, which is the name the followers of Vallabhacharya had already coined for their path, which means Rupa Nuga was coming second in the race, and he was borrowing from and writing things that had already been developed by others. Does that make sense? They were antecedent to Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But where we were really groundbreaking, is in our exploration of the mood of Radharani and specifically her followers. Vallabhacharya also worshipped Radha Krishna, as did Nimbarka. There were great acharyas who worshipped Radha and Krishna. There's a bunch of groups. Hithari Vangsh, the Nimbarka tradition, larger tradition, Vallabh, many worshippers of Radha and Krishna in North India. Also in Vrindavan. But where we shined is in our exploration of Radharani's love. We divided love for Krishna into 2, Sambandha Rupa and Kama Rupa. All the other relationships with Krishna are avoided. So this romantic desire has its own. That Kama Rupa, we then have 2 categories, Sambhog Ichatmaka and Tatbhav Ichatmaka. This is where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stepped away from everyone else who ever existed before him. Sambhog Ichatmaka is the love of the gopis. The love of the gopis. They love Krishna and they want to dance with Krishna themselves. And so their love is Krishna Snehadika. Their primary love for Krishna is greater than their love for anything else in the world. Therefore, they are Krishna Snehadika. But there's these Tat Bhav Ichatmaka devotees, and they are Samasneha. They are equal in their love for Radha and Krishna. When you're equal in your love for Radha and Krishna, you are known as Sakhi Bhav. Sakhi Bhav. And so there's 5 groups of gopis in Vrindavan. We're already in Vrindavan. But Vallabh is also in Vrindavan. Hithari Vangsh is in Vrindavan. We're also in Vrindavan. But then we have 5 groups of Sakhis. 5 groups of gopis, excuse me. So first are the Sakhis that are Krishna Snehadika. They dance with Krishna themselves. Then you have the Priya Sakhis and the Parama Preshta Sakhis, the special Sakhis. And their love for Radha and Krishna is equal. They do not favor Krishna over Radharani, and they worship Jugal Kishore, the divine couple, the young couple, the beautiful couple of Radha and Krishna. They don't want Krishna. They want Radha and Krishna. Radha and Krishna are in their hearts. They only want to be in a place where Radha and Krishna are together. In fact, they don't even want to enjoy with Krishna separately. They just want to bring Radha and Krishna together. they're called Samasneha. And there's the Priya Sakhis, like Danishta, and then there are the Parama Prishta Sakhis, the dearmost beloved Sakhis of Radharani, and they're 8 in numbers. That's also called the Ashta Sakhis. Lalita, Vishaka, Rangadevi, Tunga Vidya, etc., etc. They are the Parama Prishta Sakhis, and they love Radha and Krishna equally. Therefore, they are Tat Bhav Ichamaka. Sambhog means enjoyment. Sambhog Ichamaka. They have a desire for enjoying with Krishna directly, dancing with Krishna, but that's not the Parama Prishta Sakhis, the Ashta Sakhis. They want to see Radha and Krishna dance together. They love the two of them together. They have no desire to themselves be in the role of Radharani dancing with Krishna directly. Although sometimes that happens, that is not their desire. Their desire is to see Radha and Krishna together. And therefore they are tat bhav ichatmaka. They are characterized, atmaka, by the icha, by the desire for tat bhav, for that love between the two of them. They want to see Radha and Krishna together. At this point, there is no other tradition in the world that has codified this. The Gaudiyas, in their kind of exploration of selfless love and what that looks like, and what selfless love consists of, they are unique. Our tradition, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But we don't stop there. Then we have a group of devotees, the Prana Sakhis and the Nitya Sakhis, and they are Radha Snehadika. Their love for Radharani exceeds their love for Krishna. And that is known as Manjari Bhav, the love of the Manjaris. And it gets a name. It gets mentioned by Rupa Goswami in a single verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and it's Bhavo Lasrati. Bhavo Lasrati. It's Pushyamana. It's ever increasing. And it favors Radharani over Krishna, and this is the Manjaris. The Manjaris will never dance with Krishna. Sometimes Radharani might try to make the Manjaris dance with Krishna, or play with Krishna, or do something with Krishna. And the Manjaris will never acquiesce, they will never go along with it. They're different than the Parama Preshta Sakhis, and they're different in that when Radha and Krishna are performing intimate pastimes together, the Manjaris are there. Nobody else is there, because ultimately those other Sakhis, even the Parama Preshta Sakhis, are to some extent Radharani's surrogates or competitors. But the Manjaris, due to their age, due to their nature, they're just invisible. And they perform the most intimate services of Radha and Krishna. They massage their feet. While Radha and Krishna are in a kunja, the Manjaris will massage their feet, put food in their mouths, and perform all manner of intimate services. This is the Unata Ujjvala Rati Swabhakti Shriyam of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It says that Mahaprabhu came to give Unata, the elevated, Ujjvala, brilliant, Rati, Swabhakti of his own devotion, Shriyam, the glorious, this is all these honorifics, the glorious, elevated, brilliant attachment that was his own bhakti, bhakti towards himself. And this is that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in the mood of Radharani. Partially. At one point in the Antya Leela, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes to the shore of the ocean at Puri, mistakes it for the Jamuna, leaps in. He becomes white because of hypothermia. His limbs all become elongated, so he doesn't even look human anymore. He's caught by a fisherman who touches him and then starts chanting a Nrsimha mantra to protect himself because he feels like he's possessed by a ghost, but then it just makes it worse. He's not protected by the Nrsimha mantra. It makes it worse because, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Narasimha. And then the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are on the shore of the ocean. They're looking for Mahaprabhu everywhere. They can't find him. They meet the fisherman who's chanting Krishna's name and leaping around like he's possessed. Swarup Damodar pats him on the head a few times and slaps him and like chants Hare Krishna, and then like says you're okay. And then he comes back to normal. He says, where were you? What did you touch? And he describes how he touched a corpse that was haunted by a ghost, and it made him crazy with love for Krishna. And then they say, take us to where you were, and they find Mahaprabhu laying there on the shore, like his limbs are elongated, and he's completely unconscious. And they begin chanting Krishna Nam, verses from the Bhagavatam, and Mahaprabhu comes back to external consciousness and then begins babbling incoherently. And he says, I saw that I was standing on the bank of the Yamuna River with the other gopis, and I saw Krishna and his Sakhis, including Radharani, in the Yamuna River having a water fight. And it became like a Ras Leela, where they were all fighting with each other and splashing each other with water. The gopis taking off all the silk garments and put on white cloth, and they entered the water, and they were playing with Krishna and supporting themselves on equal terms. And then he's speaking that he saw this Leela. But the interesting thing is he saw this Leela, but we usually say Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Radharani. And although that's true, and that's a huge part of the Lord's pastimes, this particular pastime, he was not a Manjari. He was not a Radharani. He was not a Gopi. He was on the shore of the water, watching the Sakhis and Radharani enjoy the pastimes with Krishna. In a secondary position. In a position where he was a Manjari. And so Mahaprabhu's gift to the world, as understood by Rupa Goswami, who mentions this Bhavo Lasarati as a special type of Sthayi Bhav, permanent sentiment. It's a special type of love which is Raha Snehadika. It has more love for Radharani than Krishna. And it is the ultimate last limit of intense love for Krishna. And the name for those devotees are Manjaris. They're not a full bloom. A full bloom flower, then the black bee of Krishna will go and enjoy that flower. But a Manjari, as an extension off that bloom, the bee does not interface with the Manjari. The bee interfaces with the flower. The flower is the Sakhi. The Manjari is an outgrowth from that flower, which is non-different from that flower, but is a secondary outgrowth. And that Manjari, when that flower becomes pollinated, touched by the bee, then the Manjari shakes, because the Manjari is inexorably attached to the flower. The Manjaris are inexorably attached to Radharani and the gopis, and therefore they enjoy with Krishna indirectly, forever in the position of a servant. And they are called Priyanarma Manjaris, Priyanarma Sakhis. They are dearmost pleasure companions of Radharani, because they're able to be there for the most intimate pastimes with the divine couple. This was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's gift to the world that had never been given before. Radha Krishna, even the Gopi Bhav, that was there. It was super special, but it was there in a few other traditions. And this Manjari Bhav did not exist prior to Mahaprabhu and his followers. So what does it mean to be a Gaudiya? One time Bhaktisanta Saraswati said, if you worship Vishnu, you're a Vaishnava. If you worship Krishna, you're a Karshna. And if you worship Radharani, you are a Gaudiya. Our tradition, simply put, is that we wish to go back to Vrindavan and become Manjaris, or alternatively, we may become Priyanarma Sakhas. They're the cowherd boy equivalent that also assists Krishna in the kunjas. I don't want to say this, but we can just say, even though there's room for all the different relationships with Krishna, this is largely the major contribution of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. If you look at all the acharyas in our lineage from the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they're almost all Manjaris. So what does it mean to be a Hare Krishna devotee? Here's what it means. You don't want to worship Krishna in Vaikuntha. You want to go back to Vrindavan. Why? Because there's a poetic, beautiful, intimate love available in Vrindavan. Because Krishna in Vrindavan, there's Vishramba. The kind of core feature of Vrindavan is Vishramba. There's intimacy. There's trust. There's a relationship of trust and intimacy and equality between the Lord and his devotees that doesn't exist when there's too much of a hegemonic difference. There's too much of a power differential between Krishna and his devotees, where they're worshiping him as God. There's no intimacy. Vrindavan is a place where there's Vishramba, because the devotees forget Krishna's God, Krishna forgets he's God, and everybody's just friends and family. We want to go there. There's other devotees in Vrindavan. Vallabha's followers are there. Hidhari Vamsa's followers are there. The Nimbarka tradition's there. There's lots of followers. Lots of followers in Vrindavan, worshipping Radha and Krishna. But then we want to worship Radha Krishna, and we want to worship Radha Krishna in Kama Rupa Bhakti, in romantic love. But then within that Kama Rupa Bhakti, there's the gopis, and then there's these Tat-bhav Ichatmaka devotees who just worship Radha and Krishna as the love of their life. We're in that camp. Then within that camp, there's the Parama Preshna Sakhis, also known as the Ashta Sakhis. They sometimes dance with Krishna and sport with Krishna in the water and have water fights and so on and so forth. We don't want to be in that group. We want to be in the Nitya Sakhi group, following the Prana Sakhis. The difference between those two is the Prana Sakhis are eternally liberated souls in the spiritual world who are manjaris, and the Nitya Sakhis are following in their footsteps and then leave this world and go to that world. And so we want to be Nitya Sakhis following the Prana Sakhis. And those devotees take the form of manjaris. And they're priyanarma. They're there for the most intimate pastimes. Either as sakhas or sakhis, either in a male or female form. And they assist, and they are Radha Snehadika. They love Radharani more than Krishna. And it's this special phenomenon of a sthayi bhav, which is not directly towards Krishna, not even towards Radha and Krishna, but it's primarily towards Radharani, such that in the pastimes, if Krishna mistreats Radharani, the Priyanarma Sakhas will reject Krishna and they will just serve Radharani. And they're always thinking of Radharani. And in this sense, they become manjaris. They become extensions of Radharani, and they are the most intimate companions. They're there for the most intimate pastimes. That's our tradition. It's an extraordinarily beautiful idea of selfless service taken to its absolute extreme, where there's no room for anything for you, where you wholly sell yourself out to Krishna, and you love Krishna, and then you love Krishna's devotees, and that suhrit bhav, that love for Krishna's devotee, that suhrit sakhi bhav, that love for Krishna's devotee becomes so powerful that they become your worshipable object. So who is Radharani to us? She's more important than Krishna. Therefore, Hare comes before Krishna and Hare Krishna. And we worship Radha Krishna. Radharani's first. She's the most important person in the world to a devotee. Radharani is really the locus of your devotion. She's the center point of your devotion. When you just start, you look at Krishna and you're really worshiping Vishnu. Like, please, my dear Lord, help me in my difficult times. That's really Vishnu you're worshiping. You know he's God. You're asking him for favors. His name might be Krishna. He might have a flute, but you really want him to have a chakra to smite your enemies and protect you. So although you're worshiping Krishna, you're really worshiping Vishnu, because that's how you're interfacing with the Lord. If you elevate to a higher level, you start worshiping Krishna. You ask for nothing. He's your friend. In our Gaudiya tradition, we elevate to a higher level and we worship Radha and Krishna. And our life is about bringing the two of them together. And then you go even further in this selfless service and you're dedicated to Radharani. And she's the person you pray to. And she's the Swamini of your heart. She's the locus of your devotion. She's always attached to Krishna, so Krishna's there. But it's a special bhav. It's a special sentiment. And your love for Radharani never diminishes. It's not an accessory emotion like the bewilderment of Yashoda when she looks in Krishna's mouth. It's not a santri bhav. It never goes away. It is your sthayi bhav. It's bhava lasrati. And that's why Rupa Goswami in a single verse mentions it in the section on sthayi bhav. And this is what the Goswamis taught. And this is like nowhere else in world literature anywhere. This does not exist in world literature. There is nothing. In Vaishnav literature, and even in the Vrindavan literature, what to speak of in world religious literature, there is nowhere where this sentiment is actually fleshed out. This is our tradition. And so who's Radharani to us? She's everything to us. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu largely relished the mood of Radharani, but then towards the end of his pastimes, you saw him relishing Manjari Bhav as an extension of that love for Radharani. And that was the gift he gave to us, where we don't try to love Krishna like Radharani. We try to love Krishna as the Das, Anu Das of Radharani. And what is that? That's the Priyanarma Sakhis, that's the Manjaris, that's the Nitya Sakhis, that's Rupa Manjari, Kasturi Manjari, Rati Manjari. These are our gurus, and this is how they loved Krishna. And this is the great treasure of the Gaudiya tradition. This is the Unata Ujjvala Rati Swabhakti Shriyam that Krishnadas Kaviraj talks about, what the Srup Damodar talks about. This is the great secret of the Gaudiya tradition. So, who is Radharani to us? She is our Swamini. She is our master. She is the locus, the acme of our devotion. She's the person we think of. When do we think of her? We think of her at all times, but how do we think of her? We think of her that her pleasure becomes our pleasure, that her happiness becomes our happiness, to such an extent that even though we worship Jugala Kishore, the divine couple together, we favor Radharani. And our love is Radha Snehadika in Vrindavan, in an ecstatic relationship of forgetfulness with Krishna, in a romantic infused relationship that's never consummated because our love is towards Radharani and Krishna exclusively. Towards Radharani exclusively. Towards our happiness exclusively. And therefore the love is always indirect and it never goes away and it simply increases in time. So anyway, I don't generally explain this stuff, and I also want to explain it somewhat formally, and so I tried to keep it as systematic as I could. But I wanted to honor Radharani by explaining her prominence in our tradition. So, who's Radharani to you? She's Krishna. Who you thought was Krishna? It's not Krishna, it's Radharani. We worship Radharani. She's attached to Krishna, so therefore the two of them are attached. If temporarily in the Leela they become unattached, then we favor Radharani. When does that go away? It never goes away. When is it just us and Krishna? It's never just us and Krishna. When does our love for them become equal? It never becomes equal. We have a love for Radha and Krishna that favors Radharani forever. What's that called? It's called Bhava Lasrati. When they get articulated? By Rupa Goswami. Where do you find it? Hidden in our literature. Hidden. Either go or come. You can't stand there. Either go outside or come inside. There's Mommy up there. You want to go see Mommy?
I told her she could go outside.
Go outside. Go. Go.
She was worried that she had to ask.
Okay. I got to be careful because my kids are so obedient. And when I tell them don't move, then sometimes like if they're young enough, they'll pee their pants because they don't even like want to move to go use the bathroom. We want to love Radharani like that, where we don't move, where our devotion's fixed forever. In life, in death, for many lifetimes. When she's with Krishna, then it's all great. When she separates from Krishna, then we're with Radharani. Always. And forever. It's an amazing idea because it's the idea of selfless love taken to its absolute limits in a romantic, intimate relationship with Krishna. So somehow our acharyas managed to fully conceive of an intimate relationship with Krishna without ever giving up the selfless nature of love. They managed to take these two concepts, which are almost mutually exclusive, of intimate love, which needs equality, which needs kind of like intimacy and equality and it's, you know, I give up the deferential love because we're close, we're embraced. So there's no more deference because we're embraced, we become one in love. That's intimacy. But then somehow they managed to conceive of that in like the highest way possible. And then they also kept the deferential, selfless, all for you, none for me nature of love. And they join those together in a way which for me is just nothing short of miraculous. And this does not exist anywhere else in the world, even in Hinduism, even in Vaishnavism, even in Vrindavan. There is no other tradition that fleshes this out. This is our gift to the world. And when we talk about Mahaprabhu was in the mood of Radharani and gave Radharani his love, this is how he gave Radharani his love. This is how Radharani's love became practicable by us. As Sakhi Bhav, as Nitya Sakhi Bhav, as Manjari Bhav. Okay. That's it. We're all done. Yeah, thank you, IGTV. Any comments or discussion? Rupanugaji?